When my wife excused herself to take an urgent call during the Veterans Appreciation Dinner, an elderly gentleman at the next table slid an envelope across to me and whispered, "Don't go home tonight, Thomas. Check page 7. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd before I could even ask his name. I sat there, frozen, the envelope burning against my palm. Patricia had been gone less than 30 seconds. The ballroom buzzed with conversation, veterans in dress uniforms mingling with donors, but I felt completely alone. My hands shook as I looked down at the manila envelope. It had my full name typed on it, Thomas Edward Chen. Not Tom, not Tommy, my full legal name. That's when I knew something was very wrong. Patricia returned 5 minutes later, her smile bright and apologetic. "Sorry, honey. That was the event coordinator. Apparently there's an issue with the sound system for your speech." She squeezed my shoulder. "Nothing to worry about. They're handling it." I'd been married to Patricia for 18 months. After my first wife, Margaret, died 3 years ago from cancer, I thought I'd never love again. Then Patricia walked into the VA hospital where I volunteer, all warmth and kindness, asking about programs for Gold Star families. We connected over coffee. She listened to my stories about Vietnam, about Margaret, about my son David, who served in Afghanistan. She seemed to understand the weight of all those years. 6 months later, we were married at a small ceremony. David couldn't make it, stationed overseas, but Patricia insisted we not wait. "Life's too short," she said. "We've both waited long enough for happiness." Now, sitting at this charity dinner that Patricia had organized, I wondered if I'd ever really known her at all. "Thomas?" She was looking at me with concern. "Are you all right? You look pale." "Just tired," I managed. "Long day at the hospital." "Well, your speech is in 20 minutes. Why don't you go splash some water on your face? I'll guard your plate." She laughed. That musical sound I'd fallen in love with. "Can't let anyone steal your salmon." I stood, tucking the envelope inside my jacket. "Be right back." The men's room was mercifully empty. I locked myself in a stall and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were photocopies of documents, bank statements, property deeds, legal forms, all bearing my signature, or what looked like my signature. The first page showed a transfer of $200,000 from my personal account to something called Heroes Haven Foundation. I'd never heard of it. The second page was a deed transferring my house into a trust. Page 3 listed me as a board member of Heroes Haven, with Patricia as executive director. Page 7 made my blood run cold. It was a power of attorney document, giving Patricia complete control over all my assets in the event of my mental incompetence. Attached was a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Richard Morrison, stating, "I showed early signs of dementia and confusion, likely service-related PTSD complications." The evaluation was dated 2 weeks ago. I'd never met Dr. Richard Morrison. I'd never had a psychiatric evaluation. But there was my signature at the bottom, right above the notary seal. I had to grip the stall wall to keep from falling. This couldn't be real. Patricia wouldn't do this. We were married. We were in love. She'd held me through nightmares, listened to me cry about Margaret, supported my work with young veterans. Hadn't she? My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Everything okay, honey? People are asking about you." I forced myself to breathe. "Think, Thomas. You're 70 years old, but you commanded troops under fire. You survived Vietnam, cancer scares, losing the love of your life. You can handle this." But could I? Because unlike enemy fire, this was coming from inside my own home, from the woman who shared my bed. I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. Gray hair, weathered face, but my eyes were still sharp. The doctors had given me a clean bill of health at my last physical 3 months ago. No dementia. No confusion. I was sharper than most men half my age. So why did these documents say otherwise? I returned to the ballroom, tucking the envelope back into my jacket. Patricia was chatting with a couple at our table, her hand resting on my empty chair. When she saw me, her face lit up with that smile I'd trusted completely. "There you are. Thomas, this is Dr. Morrison and his wife, Emily. Richard's been doing wonderful work with our foundation. Dr. Morrison stood, extending his hand. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with perfectly styled silver hair and an expensive suit. Mr. Chen, such an honor. Patricia speaks so highly of your service. I shook his hand, my grip firm enough to make him wince slightly. Funny, doctor. I don't recall us ever meeting, yet I seem to have some medical records with your name on them. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Patricia's smile faltered for just a second before returning, tighter now. Thomas, what are you talking about? I'm talking about a psychiatric evaluation I never had. I kept my voice low, controlled. For a condition I don't have, signed by a doctor I've never met. Dr. Morrison's wife suddenly remembered she needed to check on something. She vanished into the crowd. The doctor himself stayed, but his friendly demeanor had shifted. Mr. Chen, perhaps we should discuss this privately. I think we're done here, Richard. Patricia's voice had changed too. The warmth was gone, replaced by something harder. Thank you for coming. He left. Patricia turned to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw calculation in her eyes instead of love. Where did you get those documents? Does it matter? Yes. She leaned closer, still smiling for anyone watching, but her words were ice. It matters very much, Thomas. Because whoever gave them to you just made a very serious mistake. The only mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice you stealing everything I have. Stealing? She laughed softly. Thomas, you signed those documents yourself. You just don't remember. That's the tragedy of your condition. The good days make you think you're fine, but the confusion always comes back. Dr. Morrison has been treating you for months. I've never been to his office. Yes, you have. 3 times. You just don't remember. She patted my hand, a gesture I'd once found comforting but now felt threatening. It's getting worse, honey. That's why we need the power of attorney. To protect you. To make sure you're cared for when what? When you have me declared incompetent and lock me away? Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Let's not make a scene. You have a speech to give. All these people are counting on you. I stood, my chair scraping loud enough to draw looks. I'm not giving any speech. And I'm not going home with you tonight. Thomas, we're done, Patricia. Whatever this is, whatever you've planned, it's over. I walked away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Behind me, I heard Patricia making excuses to the nearby tables. He's not feeling well. Veteran issues, you understand. So brave, but the toll it takes. I pushed through the ballroom doors and into the hotel corridor. My legs were shaking. Where could I go? Not home. She'd said not to go home. The stranger had warned me. But where? David was overseas. My few close friends were at the dinner. I couldn't call the police, could I? What would I tell them? My wife forged some documents? Mr. Chen. I spun around. The elderly gentleman from the dining room stepped out from an alcove. Up close, I could see he was older than I'd thought. Maybe 80. With a military bearing that never quite leaves a man. He wore a name tag from the dinner. Robert Castellano, Captain, U.S. Navy. Rhett. Who are you? Someone who knows what you're going through. He glanced past me toward the ballroom. We don't have much time. She'll send people looking for you. Is there somewhere we can talk? Somewhere public? The hotel bar? Too obvious. There's a diner 2 blocks east. Mulligan's. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Come through the hotel's back entrance. Take the alley behind the loading dock. They'll be watching the front. They? But he was already walking away, moving surprisingly fast for a man his age. I stood there for a moment, trying to process. This felt insane, paranoid. But the documents in my jacket were real. Patricia's reaction was real. And something about Robert Castellano's eyes, the way he'd assessed the situation, told me he was telling the truth. I went to the elevator, rode down to the parking level, and found my car. As I drove out, I saw 2 men in suits stationed at the hotel's front entrance. They weren't hotel security. I recognized their type from my military days. Hired muscle, trying to look professional. I took the back route Robert had suggested, parked 3 blocks away, and walked to Mulligan's through the rain that had started falling. The diner was old school, chrome and vinyl, half empty on a Tuesday night. Robert was in a back booth, 2 coffees, already waiting. "You came?" he said as I slid in across from him. "Good. Some men, after what you just went through, they go home anyway. Try to convince themselves it's all a misunderstanding. How did you know about the documents?" "Because I have a set too." He pulled out his own envelope. Different names, different amounts, but same scam. Patricia Chen, formerly Patricia Sullivan, formerly Patricia Hart. She's been running this operation for 7 years that we know of. Maybe longer. My hands went cold. Operation? Targeting elderly veterans with money. The pattern's always the same. She meets you somewhere connected to veteran services. She's charming, understanding, seems to share your values. Quick courtship, quick marriage. Then, slowly, she isolates you. Suggests you cut back on activities that tire you out. Offers to handle finances so you can relax. Gets you to sign documents while distracted. The power of attorney is the final step. Once she has that, she gets her partner, Dr. Morrison, to declare you incompetent. They commit you to a facility, Heroes Haven, which they own. You disappear into their care system. They drain your accounts, sell your property, and keep you medicated enough that you can't fight back. I felt sick. How many? That we found? 12 men, all veterans, all over 65, all widowers with substantial assets and no close family watching. Robert's jaw tightened. My brother Frank was number 3. By the time I realized what was happening, she'd already moved him to the facility. I tried to get him out, but the law was on her side. She had the power of attorney, the medical evaluation, everything legal. Frank died there 6 months later. The death certificate said heart failure. But Frank's heart was fine before Patricia came into his life. My God. After Frank died, I started digging, found the other victims. Most are still alive, but they're locked away, family members shut out, assets being slowly liquidated. The facility is very good at keeping people isolated, and Patricia always moves on before anyone gets suspicious. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. They said it was a civil matter. The documents were legal, properly notarized. The medical evaluations came from a licensed psychiatrist. Patricia had character witnesses, tax records for her foundation. Everything looked legitimate. A few detectives tried to investigate, but they couldn't find enough evidence for criminal charges. And the victims themselves can't testify because they've been declared mentally incompetent. I stared down at my coffee, watching the steam rise. So what do? We stop her, before she files the power of attorney with the court. Before Dr. Morrison's evaluation becomes official, we expose the whole operation in a way they can't deny or hide. Robert leaned forward. But I can't do it alone, Thomas. I'm too close to it. My brother's death makes me look like I have a personal vendetta. We need someone on the inside. Someone she doesn't know I've contacted. Someone who can get evidence we can take to the FBI. What kind of evidence? The real financial records. The pattern of victims. Proof that Dr. Morrison's evaluations are fabricated. Patricia keeps everything in a digital ledger on her computer at your house. She thinks she's protected, but she's arrogant. She doesn't believe any of her targets could outsmart her. The thought of going back to my house made my skin crawl. She'll know something's wrong. After tonight, she'll try to smooth it over. She's done this before. She'll tell you that you had an episode at the dinner, that she's worried about you, that she only wants to help. She's very good at gaslighting, making you doubt your own perceptions. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. But you're stronger than her victims have been, Thomas. You suspected something was wrong early. Most men don't realize until it's too late. The warning you gave me tonight was a risk. But I've been following Patricia for months, waiting for her to make a mistake. When I saw her pattern starting with you, saw the timeline accelerating, I knew I had to intervene. Tonight was supposed to be when she got you to sign some final documents. There was going to be an incident during your speech. You'd become confused, disoriented. Dr. Morrison would help you off stage. By morning, you'd wake up in Heroes Haven. I thought about the speech I'd been supposed to give. About Patricia insisting the venue needed to be this specific hotel. About Dr. Morrison being there with his wife. They were going to drug me. That's my guess. Your salmon, probably. Patricia would have been horrified, would have insisted you go somewhere quiet to recover. Dr. Morrison would have recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation. Once at Heroes Haven, they'd have gotten you to sign the power of attorney while you were still confused and scared. Jesus, you're lucky, Thomas. Someone gave you those documents before she could spring the trap. I'd almost forgotten about that. Who was your source? Who gave you my files? Robert smiled slightly. I can't tell you that. But let's just say Patricia isn't as smart as she thinks. She's used the same notary for all her documents. Eleanor Vance, 68, works out of her home office. Eleanor's nephew served in Iraq with Frank's son. When Eleanor started noticing a pattern in the documents she was notarizing for Patricia, documents that always involved elderly veterans, she mentioned it to her nephew. He mentioned it to Frank's son. Frank's son called me. So the notary is helping you? She can't refuse to notarize legitimate-looking documents without losing her license, but she can make copies, and she can delay processing until certain people have a chance to act. Robert pulled out a burner phone. This is for you. Untraceable. My number's programmed in. When you're ready to get that ledger, you call me. I'll walk you through accessing her computer. And then we take it to the FBI, along with testimony from Eleanor, financial records showing the pattern, and affidavits from family members of victims. With everything together, we can force a real investigation. Shut down Heroes Haven. Get the victims out. Put Patricia and Morrison in prison where they belong. I took the phone, feeling its weight. This was really happening. My wife, the woman I'd loved and trusted, was a criminal who'd planned to steal everything I had and lock me away. Maybe kill me, like Robert's brother. Thomas, I need you to understand something. Robert's voice was serious. This is dangerous. If Patricia realizes you're gathering evidence against her, she'll move fast. She has people who handle problems. The muscle at the hotel tonight? They're not just for show. One of her previous targets, a man named Gregory Walsh, tried to expose her. He had a fatal car accident 3 days later. You think she killed him? I think she's capable of protecting her operation. So if you're going to do this, you need to be smart. Play along, make her think you believe her gaslighting, and get that evidence quickly. I thought about running, taking my car and driving until I found somewhere Patricia couldn't reach me. But then I thought about the other victims, the 12 men Robert had mentioned, Frank, who died in that facility. The families shut out, watching helplessly as their loved ones disappeared into a system designed to drain them dry. I'll do it, I said. Tell me what I need to know. We spent the next hour going over details. Patricia's computer was in her home office, a room she kept locked, but I knew where she hid the key. The ledger was encrypted, but Robert had gotten the password from watching Patricia's keystrokes through Eleanor's window during one of their meetings. I'd need to copy the file to a USB drive, plus any related financial documents I could find. One more thing, Robert said as we were preparing to leave. When you go home tonight, she's going to be in full damage control mode. She'll probably have Dr. Morrison there. They'll try to make you think you imagined the whole confrontation at dinner, that you had some kind of episode. Don't argue too much. Let them think they're winning. Won't she suspect I'm faking? Maybe. But she's also convinced that her victims are too old, too confused, too trusting to fight back. Use her arrogance against her. I drove home slowly, rehearsing what I'd say. My house looked the same as when I'd left that evening. Warm lights in the windows, Patricia's car in the driveway beside mine. But now it felt like a trap. Everything about my life for the past 18 months had been a lie. Patricia met me at the door, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Thomas. Thank God. I've been so worried. I called David, but he hasn't called back yet, and Dr. Morrison said, I'm sorry. The words tasted like ash. I don't know what happened tonight. I got confused, paranoid. The stress of the speech. Maybe. She pulled me into a hug, and I forced myself not to recoil. Oh, honey, it's okay. It's not your fault. This is what Dr. Morrison warned us about. The confusion episodes. But we're going to get through this together. Dr. Morrison was in my living room, still in his suit from the dinner. Thomas, I'm glad you came home. Patricia was very concerned. Why don't we sit down and talk about what you're feeling? They worked on me for 2 hours. Gentle voices, patient explanations, carefully constructed lies about treatments I'd supposedly received, medications I'd supposedly been prescribed. They showed me documents I'd supposedly signed, photos of appointments I didn't remember. Patricia held my hand and cried about how scary it was to watch me slip away. I played along. Confused old man, grateful for help, sorry for causing trouble, all while fury burned in my chest. Finally, they left me alone to rest. Dr. Morrison wanted me to go to Heroes Haven for observation, but I'd refused strongly enough that they'd backed off. For now, Patricia tucked me into bed like I was a child, kissed my forehead, and whispered that everything would be all right. I waited until 3 a.m. The house was silent. Patricia was asleep in the guest room, something she'd started doing a few weeks ago under the excuse of not disturbing my sleep with her insomnia. Now I understood. She wanted to be able to move around the house without me noticing. I crept downstairs to her office. The key was where I remembered, tucked inside a hollowed-out book on the shelf. Her computer was sleeping but not shut down. I used the password Robert had given me. The ledger was exactly where he'd said it would be. A spreadsheet with 12 names, dates, amounts. Frank Castellano, $340,000. Gregory Walsh, $280,000. James Patterson, $420,000. On and on. At the bottom, my name, Thomas Chen, $1,100,000 in progress. I plugged in the USB drive and started copying. The file was large, taking forever to transfer. Every creak of the house made my heart stop. If Patricia found me now, Thomas? I spun around. Patricia stood in the doorway, wearing a robe, her hair down. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then her eyes went to the computer screen. Oh, Thomas. Her voice was sad. Why couldn't you just let yourself be taken care of? Is any of it real? Did you ever care about me at all? She moved into the room, and I saw she had her phone in her hand. Does it matter? You're a means to an end. You all are. Lonely old men with more money than sense, clinging to memories of dead wives and glory days. You practically beg to be taken advantage of. Margaret wasn't just a memory. Margaret's dead, and you would have wasted all that money she worked for. On what? Dying slowly in some veteran's home? At least my way, the money goes somewhere useful. The foundation does real work, Thomas. Heroes Haven is a state-of-the-art facility. The residents are well cared for. Frank Castellano died there. Something flickered in her expression. Frank had a heart condition. These things happen with elderly patients. And Gregory Walsh? I don't know what you're talking about. But her hand tightened on her phone. The USB drive finished copying. I pulled it out and held it up. This is over, Patricia. I'm taking this to the FBI. You and Morrison and everyone involved in this sick operation. She laughed. And tell them what? That your wife, who has power of attorney due to your severe dementia, stole from you. Thomas, think about what you're doing. You're a 70-year-old man who had a very public episode tonight at a charity dinner. Doctor, Morrison has documented your decline. I have witnesses who will testify about your confusion, your paranoia. You're playing right into the narrative we've built. Then why does it sound like you're trying to talk me out of it? Her smile vanished. Because I was hoping we could resolve this quietly. But if you insist on being difficult. She raised her phone. I have 2 men waiting outside. They'll take you to Heroes Haven tonight. By morning, you'll be legally committed. And that USB drive? We'll say it's more evidence of your paranoid delusions. Who's going to believe a senile old veteran over a respected psychiatrist and a decorated charity director? Robert Castellano will. I hadn't meant to say his name, but the effect was immediate. Patricia's face went pale. What? Frank's brother. He knows everything. He's been investigating you for 2 years, and he's not alone. There are others. Families of your victims, a notary who's been documenting your fraud. We're taking you down, Patricia. Tonight was just the beginning. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she dialed her phone. We have a problem. Chen knows about Castellano. Yes, I'm sure. No, we need to move now. Get Morrison. Get the team. We're taking him to the facility tonight, and we're disappearing the evidence. All of it. She hung up and looked at me with something like regret. I actually liked you, Thomas. You reminded me of my father. But business is business. Your father must be so proud. My father died penniless, draining my mother's savings on medical care. I learned then that being honorable just makes you a target. Better to be the predator than the prey. I heard cars pulling up outside. The men from the hotel. I had maybe minutes before they broke in and dragged me away. The USB drive was in my pocket, but if they searched me, they'd find it. Thomas, don't make this harder than it has to be. Patricia moved toward me. Come quietly, and I promise you'll be comfortable at Heroes Haven. Fight, and, well, accidents happen. Elderly men fall downstairs, hit their heads. Such a tragedy. I backed toward the office window. Second floor, but there was a trellis. In my 20s, I'd climbed enemy fortifications under fire. At 70, I was about to climb down my own house to escape my wife. You won't get away with this. I already have. 12 times. I heard the front door burst open. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Patricia smiled. It's over, Thomas. Accept it. Instead, I grabbed her laptop and threw it through the window. Glass shattered. An alarm started wailing. Patricia screamed, lunged for me, but I was already climbing through the broken window, my hands torn and bleeding as I grabbed the trellis. 70 years old. Arthritis in my knees. But fear is a hell of a motivator. I was halfway down when the trellis started pulling away from the wall. For a sick moment, I was falling, seeing the concrete patio rushing up. Then I hit the ground, rolling like they'd taught us in parachute training a lifetime ago. Something in my shoulder crunched, but I was moving, running across the dark lawn while men shouted behind me. I'd parked my car 3 blocks away, Robert's advice. Never go home in the same car you leave in. I made it there, gasping, bleeding, shoulder screaming. Started the engine with shaking hands and drove. The burner phone rang. Thomas, I heard alarms. What happened? She knows. She knows everything. Morrison's coming. They're destroying evidence. I barely got out. Where are you? Driving. I don't know where. Listen to me. Go to the address I'm texting you. It's a safe house. You'll be protected there. And Thomas? Did you get the ledger? I patted my pocket, felt the USB drive. Yes. Then we've got her. All we needed was proof. The FBI's been watching this case for months, but they couldn't move without evidence. With that ledger and your testimony, they can get warrants, freeze assets, shut down the facility. You did it. Frank would be proud. You avenged him. You saved 12 men from dying the way he did. And Patricia's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. I drove to the safe house, a small apartment in a building Robert owned. Inside, I found a first aid kit, clean clothes, and a cot. I bandaged my hands, wrapped my shoulder, and lay down as the adrenaline drained away. 3 hours later, at dawn, federal agents raided Heroes Haven. Patricia was arrested at my house, along with Dr. Morrison and 6 others involved in the operation. The victims were moved to legitimate care facilities. Their assets were frozen, their families notified. The investigation uncovered not 12 victims, but 17. 5 more men who died at Heroes Haven under suspicious circumstances. Patricia and her partners had stolen over $6 million over 8 years. The trial was 6 months later. I testified for 3 days, walking the court through everything. The forged documents, the fake medical evaluations, Patricia's confession in my office. The USB drive was entered as evidence, along with testimony from Eleanor, the notary, families of victims, and forensic accountants who traced the money. Patricia's defense tried to claim I was mentally incompetent, that my testimony was unreliable, but my doctors testified I was sharp as ever. David flew home from overseas to support me. Robert sat in the gallery every day, a silent witness to his brother's vindication. Patricia was convicted on 43 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Dr. Morrison got 25 years. Patricia got life without parole. Heroes Haven was shut down. The building sold, the proceeds going to the victims and their families. I got my money back, my house, my life. But some things you can't recover. I'd loved Patricia, trusted her, built a future with her. That betrayal lives in my bones now, a permanent ache. Robert and I meet for coffee every Tuesday at Mulligan's. We talk about Frank, about the other victims, about the warning signs we learned to recognize. We've started a foundation, a real one, that helps elderly veterans spot financial predators. David visits when he can, making sure I'm really okay. Sometimes people ask me why I didn't just run that night. Why I risked everything to get evidence instead of disappearing. The answer is simple. I spent my 20s fighting for men I'd never met, in a jungle on the other side of the world. I wasn't about to stop fighting at 70, especially when the enemy was in my own home. Patricia counted on her victims being too old, too trusting, too ashamed to fight back. She was wrong, because the thing about veterans is, we never really stop being soldiers. We just choose different battles. And this was one battle I was damn well going to win. Standing at Frank Castellano's grave 6 months after the trial, Robert placed a hand on my shoulder. He would have liked you, Thomas. Would have said you had guts. I just did what anyone would do. No. Most people freeze when they realize someone they love has been lying to them. They want to believe the lie because the truth is too painful. You faced the truth and fought back. That takes a special kind of courage. I looked at Frank's headstone. Beloved brother, devoted father, veteran, survivor. Except he hadn't survived. Not Patricia's trap. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. You saved 12 others. And you made sure Patricia can never hurt anyone again. That's Frank's legacy now. Not how he died, but what came after. We stood there in silence. 2 old soldiers, paying respect to a third. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. My shoulder still ached where I'd landed that night, a permanent reminder of the woman I'd loved and the trap I'd escaped. But I was alive. I was free. And somewhere, Patricia was learning that predators sometimes meet prey that bite back. I'd like to think Frank would appreciate that. As I drove home that evening, I passed the building that used to be Heroes Haven. It was being renovated into actual veteran housing now, affordable apartments for those who served. The sign outside read Castellano House, in honor of Frank. Sometimes justice takes a while. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. An envelope slipped across a table by a stranger with everything to lose. But it comes, and when it does, it's worth every sleepless night, every moment of fear, every risk you took to make it happen. That's what I tell the people who call me now, other elderly men who've noticed something off about their situations, other families worried about loved ones. I tell them Frank's story, Robert's determination, my narrow escape, and I tell them the most important thing. You're not crazy, you're not confused, and you're not alone. If something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Document everything. Find someone who believes you. Fight back with every ounce of strength you have left, because the Patricia Chens of the world, they count on silence. They count on shame. They count on their victims being too proud or too scared to ask for help. Don't give them that power. I learned that lesson at 70 years old, the hard way. But I learned it. And now, every Tuesday at Mulligan's Diner, over coffee with Robert and anyone else who needs to hear it, I make sure that lesson spreads. The bill on the table is always split evenly. The coffee's always hot. And somewhere in the back of the diner, there's a booth where an old sailor once saved an old soldier's life with a whispered warning and an envelope full of truth. We keep that booth reserved, just in case someone else needs it someday. Because the thing about predators is they never really stop hunting. They just find new prey. But now we're hunting them back. And we've got patience, evidence, and nothing left to lose. Patricia's in prison for life. Doctor. Morrison won't see freedom until he's 80. Heroes Haven is ashes and bitter memories. But Castellano House stands tall, sheltering the very people Patricia tried to destroy. That's justice. That's victory. And that's what happens when you underestimate a 70-year-old veteran who still remembers how to fight. Some battles you fight with weapons, some with words. This one, we fought with truth. And truth, it turns out, is the most powerful weapon of all.